Hello there, and welcome to another one of my book reviews. Now, before I begin, apologies to any damage your retinas may be receiving from my shirt, but I thought I would spruce things up slightly for today's episode, considering we're well and truly into the summer months over here in good old Blighty. Incidentally, this shirt, the first day I wore it, I went for a meal with my sister Adele, and the waiter was so bamboozled by my shirt that he wrongly assumed that I was Adele's husband. Later on that evening, I went to a dancing party, old-fashioned style, and I met who would become my future wife. Currently engaged at the moment, so I think this shirt may have some magical properties, perhaps the discarded fragments from an alien spaceship, perhaps. Anyway, I'm getting beyond myself. Let's have a look at this book. Today we're looking at Shadow of Heaven by Bob Shaw. Now, this book was unearthed in one of my book hauls from a couple of months ago, and I decided to read it based on the cover alone. So this is a scan of my particular copy. Later on, as the video goes on, I'll put up a few others that have appeared in the past. There aren't many for this one because I think it's relatively rare. Perhaps not very successful, not sure. Anyway, I decided to read this book, the first book I've read by Bob Shaw, purely because of the cover. Wonderfully retro in appearance. It's hard to tell how it's been rendered, actually. I assume it's a painting, can't quite tell. And of course there's this wonderful skull down in the foreground. Anything with a skull on it, and I go weak at the knees, and I will read it. And it's also buried in this various foliage, and we have this wonderful robot in the background that resembles the robotic exoskeletons used in the Alien films. Was it Aliens? Yeah, I think it was that one. The bright yellow one. Anyway, this one isn't. This one is a kind of agricultural robot. But anyway, we'll get to that a bit later. Before I start talking about the book itself and whether I like the damn thing or not, let's just have a look at my particular copy, because I always like to have a little gander at it. So this was originally published in 1969, and I've got the 1970 edition. What is it there? It's the New English Library edition. Now, I did a sniffing of this during the book haul, but I'll have another little sniff now just to see if the fragrance has matured since I read it. Here we go. Yeah, I mean, last time I said it was an empty cupboard. So a cupboard that's previously had some food stores, and it's gone slightly rotten, that kind of smell, vegetative smell, which is good actually, considering we've got lots of vegetation on the cover. But of course it also smells of wood. Okay, so let's get down to it. I'm going to attempt a synopsis now at this point of the story. There may be some spoilers, unavoidable I'm afraid, but bear with me. I won't give away the ending, which is completely bonkers. But yeah, let's get to grips with what the story's about. So the story is kind of through the eyes of one Victor Sterling, who works as a journalist for a newspaper called The Record. He lives in a city that spreads all the way across, or all the way along the coast, the eastern coast of America, all the way from Maine down to Florida, I think. So it's one vast city. Now, there's a reason why humanity has gravitated towards the coast, and that's because of food shortages caused by a world war in the past, where a herbicidal bomb was released, which destroyed all vegetation on the planet, or anything edible anyway. So humanity is now forced into eating plankton, or various sea-derived vegetables that's grown in the sea. That's a really interesting idea. Anyway, just off the coast is a massive disc, one of many discs that is just floating 3 miles high in the sky. And on top of these discs are agricultural plantations that produce some of the vegetables, wheat especially, things that are no longer able to grow down on the surface. But so it's up high enough so that the herbicidal cloud that remains isn't able to attack it. So there we are, we've got an interesting little scenario there already. These discs are called international land extensions. And this particular one that's off the coast of where New York, I suppose, would have been, is called Heaven. They call it Heaven just as a kind of nickname for it, I suppose. Anyway, this Heaven moniker is used on a number of occasions for poetic reference. It's slightly trite. Personally, I didn't really like that. But anyway, that's beside the point. So this Victor Sterling is engaged at the very beginning of the book in a missing persons kind of story. And he's looking through the missing persons list in the records of the newspaper, and he comes across a name that he recognises, and for good reason. It's his half-brother, Johnny Considine. So he leaves work and goes to see his mother and find out what's going on. Because they're kind of estranged, the half-brothers. I don't think they really ever got on very well together. And she hasn't heard from him either. So he goes on a kind of a mission to try to find where he is. Spoiler alert, he's up there in heaven, and not the one that's guarded over by God, if you believe in such things. No, it's up there on the agricultural disc. Another interesting aspect of the story is that, so the disc is an agricultural platform down in this very long, vast city. It's called the Great Compression. So basically, when humanity had to flee to the coast into these long, sprawling cities, this was called the compression because they're having to live in very, very tiny apartments, like 10 feet squared. And a lot of people seem to be okay with living that way, but there's some that aren't able to get on with it. And so where might such people flee to? And of course, yes, they flee to heaven. And this is something that Victor discovers or presumes because his half-brother had taken some old boots that once belonged to their father, flying boots or something. It's pretty tenuous link. But anyway, he decides to go up to heaven. Up on this plantation, he finds a interesting kind of world that's run by these great big robots, these kind of like the ones I showed at the beginning on the cover, kind of moving gantries that go along rails, and they're able to plant and harvest food. He also discovers up there, aside from the miles of wheat and various other things that are growing, a kind of a population of people that have fled there, a small community of around 200 people. And Johnny, his brother, half-brother, has become the leader of this motley crew. Now, this setting is now used to play out a fairly boring and inconsequential drama that really doesn't really make sense, I don't think. I'll talk a little bit about that, but enough to say that so these land extensions are up 3 miles in the sky using some kind of anti-gravity technology powered by these power stations on them. I mean, if they're able to do things like that, it beggars belief that the whole world's starving at the same time. But, you know, let's go beyond that. So there's this agency called the FTA, which is the Food Technology Authority. And so in a world where food is scarce, this it's not a form of government, but they have vast power because they control the manufacture of food, both in the sea and up on these land extensions. Yeah, so these 200 or so souls that have fled to heaven, they're doing so because they're fleeing the idea of compression down on the surface. For whatever reason, a lot of them seem to suffer from claustrophobia, or for various political reasons, they don't want to be associated with the way people are living down on the surface. So they've escaped to this heaven, shall we say. So they're doing so by stealing crops from these vast plantations and hunting the odd bird that's unfortunate enough to cross their path 3 miles up. I'm not sure if birds fly that high. I'm not sure. But anyway, a force field surrounds this thing as well, so that they're able to breathe conveniently. They're able to breathe okay, and it doesn't get too cold up there. Anyway, enter the FTA again. So the Food Association, whatever they're called, they have this dastardly plan to raise these platforms down to the ground and build luxury apartments for those that can afford it. Again, I suppose to escape the confines of down on the surface. Now, these various people that are now living up there find themselves at the rough end of this deal, and so there's a definite threat there. The FTA are quite brutal bastards, and they're quite happy to kill them all if necessary, but they try to get them down as well. So Victor Sterling is trying to mediate, try to save their lives and whatnot. It's a wonderful setting, actually, the idea of this huge landmass being 3 miles up, and you can actually see down to the Atlantic 3 miles beneath them. It's a very thin kind of platform that they're on, and the various dangers that are implicit in that scenario. Various people do fall to their deaths later on in the book, which is quite a scary prospect. Okay, so yeah, the drama aspect of this for me did absolutely nothing. The setting, the idea of compression, and the lack of crops due to this past herbicide that was used during a war, all very interesting, really enjoyed it. It is of its time though, so the drama is superficial for me. It didn't really do much for me at all, and it just got far more bonkers as we got towards the end. As you can probably imagine, the way women are portrayed in this story are of its time also. The main female character, if you can call her a character, is a woman called Melissa, who is the daughter of the former leader of this ragtag group, who was a former judge. Now, Melissa is the kind of love interest of Sterling and also his half-brother. And so there's a bit of a power struggle to claim her, I would say. And that, as far as I can tell, is the only function she performs. The other women are either just on the periphery, or at one point one of the men offered two of the women up to Sterling as a kind of present, which Sterling actually refuses, thank God. But yeah, you get the idea. It's like watching one of the early James Bond films, perhaps, in that regard. Yes, but it's of its time. We can recognise that, and we can look at over these things. Now, I won't say how it ends, because it's completely bonkers anyway, but we get an idea of where the ending is going to rear its ugly head when Johnny proposes at one point the madcapped idea that he's going to fly this disc up to the fucking moon to live in orbit around the moon, using the force field, of course. I suppose it's possible. I mean, if you can have a disc floating 3 miles up in the air and the disc itself is bloody massive, then why not send the devil to the moon? But anyway, yeah, things go berserk. Anyway, right, let's get down to business, and I'm going to give this book a rating. Down you come. There you are. Okay, so as you can imagine, this book didn't really do much for me. I'm going to give this book 2 stars out of 5. Now, the 2 stars is purely on the ideas. The idea of the city, the idea of compression, the idea that people would flee it if they could, up to these 3-mile high discs floating in the sky. Other than that, the drama that plays out, the way it's written even, didn't really do much for me. So, yeah, 2 out of 5, and it gets the old heave. Oh, get out of here! Yeah, devil is trying to come back. Yeah, so there we are. I'm not going to consign Bob Shaw to the dungeons of never reading ever again. I will read another of his, and if you've read any of Bob Shaw and you like him, please suggest a book that you think will tickle my pickle. I'm sure he's got better in him, and this was quite an early book in his career, so I'm sure he got better. Again, this may have been something that was serialised in a magazine for all I know. I didn't really do much reading around Shaw's work, only that he was from Belfast, so he was a Brit, and so the way it's written certainly references that. I assumed, because I never really read into these people before reading the books, I just want to get a clean impression of what's going on. It was written in a British style. The spellings, I think, were British, but I can't remember. So, yeah, it read like a British author. So, yeah, that made sense to me. But anyway, let's leave it there for now. Thanks for watching if you have. Apologies if this is a bit of a travesty of a review. I struggled with this one today, and so I've had to patchwork it together in a fairly bleak manner. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time. Cheerio.